Hey everyone, welcome back. We are in the Leadership Lounge where we embark on a journey for better leadership. And I always like to make this very, very clear. It's not about arrival, it is about alignment. There's no finish line, there's no spot that you get to signify that we've achieved it. This is about evolving with the needs of those who we serve, evolving so that we can reach that shared vision that we're managing. I am Dr. Shanesia Davis, and this episode, we are unlearning urgency. Okay, we're trading in panic for intentionality, and we're trading in panic for precision. In this episode, when we're talking about urgency, I'm not talking about just time management. I'm building on last episode, and I'm talking really about trauma. I'm talking about the systems that we're managing that reward speed over strategy. I'm talking about that constant need to just move, even if you don't necessarily know what to do, just for the sake of looking busy. I'm talking about that performative leadership. I'm talking about that type of performative leadership that replaces presence. And we know that presence is one of the leader's greatest assets. That allows you to lead with clarity. That allows you to really take note of what's going on around you so that you can make decisions that are intentional and precise. In this episode, we're going to share a leadership story and talk about the real costs of creating environments or supporting environments that value this sense of urgency. Then, in order to unlearn it, we're going to have to get to the root. Where did urgency come from? Who created this sense or this need to be constantly busy in order to show that you have value? Lastly, I'm going to share 6 practical tips to really help us engage in the practice of unlearning urgency. Because remember, there's no arrival, there's no destination. This is constant practice. As leaders, we practice getting better at this thing for the people that we serve and for that shared vision that we're trying to get to. And since this concept has been ingrained in us, urgency can feel like really good leadership. It can feel like we're really striving towards the goal. There's no time to waste. And it is true, we don't have time to waste. But if we're not careful and if we don't check our patterns, it can become destructive because it can look like energy. It can look like movement. It can look like productivity. But here's the cost. When everything feels urgent, nothing has your full attention. And the work that we're doing deserves and needs our full attention. So let's get into it. We're going to talk about Shana. She's a top-level executive. And remember, I am just using random names. If your name is Shana, you're a top-level executive. I am not speaking about you. But let's get into the story about Shana. Shana is a top-level executive stepping into a turnaround movement. There's a lot to be done in very little time. Her mission was clear. The organization had underperformed for years, and she was determined to make it better. She had the skill set to make it better. She had the team to make it better, and she had the team to make it better fast. Her rally cry was rooted in care, right? They deserve more. We deserve to win. The people who we are serving deserve to have that win. At first, her urgency inspired people, but soon it overwhelmed them. Multiple strategies were happening at once. Priorities, they shifted weekly. Staff were managing new systems and new priorities before the old ones even had the opportunity to pan out. People didn't know where to focus, what to focus on. They only knew that they were constantly sprinting, constantly moving. They felt like there was no room for air. Here's a few things that Shana and her leadership team heard and saw in this culture of urgency. And maybe you've heard some of these too. They heard things like, I'm just trying to keep up, or I don't have time to plan, or there's more things on my plate. However, there's nothing getting taken off. And we all know that one of the loudest things can be silence in meetings, when there should be rich discussion about things impacting the organization and the people that the organization is serving. Some things that they saw were team members jumping from meeting to meeting with no break in between. They heard people saying, I didn't eat. I didn't have water. I didn't have time to go to the bathroom today. They saw staff complaining about having to redo work because a priority shifted mid-project. Last-minute scrambling started to become the norm. And collaboration, forget about it. It's easier and faster for me to just do things on my own versus wait for input or wait for somebody else to jump on board. Now, if you're hearing or seeing some of these things that Shana and her team heard and saw, You probably have a culture of urgency. And for many of us, like even myself, I praised urgency for a very long time until I started to really understand the root of urgency. And that's what we're going to dig into now. Urgency is typically seen as a tool to balance injustice, especially in communities of color, especially if you're in service positions like schools or nonprofits. This is where you get to something called the emotional tax. This need to carry the weight, this need to right the wrongs of things that happened long before we got here. However, we feel the need to correct it immediately because there are lives at stake. This is where we feel the tension, the need to make up for stolen time, make up for stolen resources, make up for stolen opportunities. So what ends up happening? We move fast. We move really fast because that shows how much we care. And what we end up doing is we sacrifice so much. We sacrifice sleep. We sacrifice boundaries. We sacrifice our health. We sacrifice the people that we were actually charged with being able to support in pursuit of that shared vision. We sacrifice those things because the faster we move, the more we quote unquote care. That's what we've been taught. We've been taught that urgency means care. We've been taught that urgency means you're taking it really serious. You think it's important. And anything opposite than urgent, or if you try to push back on urgency or somebody else pushes back on urgency, then we label them as having less care than we have. And listen, don't get me wrong. There will be moments where you have to grind. There will be moments when you have to hustle. What I'm talking about is a culture of urgency where everything feels like hustle. I'm talking about when it's not the exception, but it's actually the rule. So if you're having instances where this is the grind moment, that's going to happen, especially leading organizations and communities of color, because you're making up for lost time. What I'm really trying to have us unlearn is this culture where that is the norm, that constant need to be moving fast in order to show that you are valuable. That's what I'm talking. See, over time, we've been told either directly or indirectly that your value is in how much you can carry, and how much you can carry make it look easy. Matter of fact, many of us got to the positions, myself included, to where we are by being able to juggle all of those things and make it look easy. Being able to get results and make it look easy. And now in your leadership position, you're expected to create a culture where you have a whole bunch of other individuals that carry a lot and make it look easy. Grin and bear it, while sacrificing them as people. But here's the hard truth. Urgency is not a strategy. It's not a tool to depend on. It is that break glass in case of emergency moment. It should not be the norm, the culture of your organization, because we have too much at stake. If we break down the people in charge of getting to the vision, how are we going to get to the vision? Again, urgency is not strategy. When you actually break it down and think about it, it's deeply rooted in fear, because it's deeply rooted in survival. When you trace it back, urgency is a hallmark of oppression. How much can you do in this very little time so that you don't bring harm to yourself, so that you don't bring harm to those who you love? It's a survival strategy that was born in systems that prize productivity over people, because people were replaceable. Productivity and revenue wasn't. And too often, especially in communities of color, especially as leaders of color, we adopt that sense of urgency and call it commitment. And then we shame anyone who doesn't show that sense of urgency, because that must mean they're less committed. But here's the thing, unlearning urgency, giving yourself that space to really practice. Again, there's no arrival. To practice unlearning urgency gives you space to have clarity. Make decisions, good, sound decisions that impact the people in the organization for the better. For you to be able to factor in all of the data markers and not just one data, not just to react to a stimulus. What I really want us to get is that it's so important for us not to mask panic, because that's what it is, panic, as purpose. Or we see something we don't like and we panic to fix it, and then we call it purpose. And I really want to encourage us as leaders, because we've been charged with something so beautiful. We've been charged with something so powerful. Where we're going requires our presence. And every single time, urgency snuffs out presence, because we're reacting. We're reacting to the thing that's in front of us. And thinking about that root of urgency, at one time, it really did work, because we're not the society that we are anymore. We've evolved. And so our way of thinking, our mindset has to evolve with it. We're holding on to outdated mindsets and practices trying to solve new world issues. So a time when it worked was when we were doing rote things. The problems that leaders were solving were rote problems or routine problems. You were focusing on the productivity of a line. But see, now the things that leaders and workers had to do, robots and AI can do. They can do that stuff. What they can't do is be present. That is what we need you. That is what they need us for as leaders. In order to do the monumental work that we're doing, we're shaping identity. We're shaping culture. We're shaping safety. And most importantly, we're shaping sustainability. See, here's the thing though. All of those things require us to be present. And we're just not present when we're in a constant state of urgency. Only thing we see is the thing in front of us. But see, that impulse to rush is wired deep in our systems because we've been taught that that's what works. But I said it before and I'll say it again. When urgency is driving your decisions, fear is driving your leadership. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that moving slower automatically gets you to more intentionality or to be more precise. What I'm saying is that allows you the space to really be able for you to analyze all of the data markers so that you can make an intentional decision. Unlearning urgency though, requires you to be self-aware. And what are the things that's happening when you know that you are reacting or acting in an urgent manner? Because once you're aware, then you can regulate. Once you regulate, then you can clarify your priorities. And once you clarify your priorities, then you know who to speak to, who to collaborate with to have a well thought out decision. And I want to be very clear because I keep using the word precision. Precision is not about perfection. Precision is about thoughtful decision making. You being able to have the space to really realize what is working, what is not working, so that you can make a thoughtful decision. And the intentionality that we speak about is knowing the why behind what you're doing and what you're intending to get as a result of doing that thing. So in every episode, I'd like to leave you with tips. And today we're going to talk about 6 practical tips for you to be able to start unpacking that sense of urgency in your leadership so you can create cultures and environments that is based in clarity versus fear. You can just choose 1 to 2 to do at any given time. 1 preferably, master that, then move on to a different strategy. So one of the strategies is to build reflection time into your day, every day. And it can be as little as 5 minutes and as much as 15 to 30 minutes. As long as you have untouchable time during your day, not saying that that time may not move during the day, but you have time in your day to reflect. Where am I in progress to our goals? Did I make a knee-jerk decision? How have the decisions that I made, the actions that I took, get me closer or farther away from the goals that we're seeking? Here's my favorite. My favorite tip is to define what is urgent. I love operating norms because that puts us all on the same playing field. Because what I feel is urgent, you may not feel is urgent. And if we're on the same team and we have different versions of what urgency is, that can create a culture where everything always feels urgent. So my tip is to define what urgency is. What makes something urgent? What makes something have us to drop everything, move, shift now? Define it and then communicate that. A pro tip would be to define that with your team, especially your leadership team. Define it with, if you have a leadership team, define it with your team so you can all be on the same page and bought in to what is urgent. But again, communicate that. So then team members and those who you're serving understand, oh, not everything is urgent, but I know when this thing comes up, it's gonna feel urgent because you've defined what urgency is and you've communicated that. Here's another tip. Audit your schedule. Look at your calendar. How many things on your calendar was urgent? Here's another thing too. How many things did you do in the day that wasn't even on your calendar? That's even more of a sign that you're operating in an urgency culture. For the next tip, a good practice to have is build in pauses. A lot of stuff comes to us leaders all at one time. Build in time for a pause. Anywhere between 30 and 90 seconds. Pause before you react. That allows your nervous system to kind of regulate so that it's not just your first impulse. Because in many cases, our first impulse isn't the most sound action. And the way you allow time for that pause is to say, let me get back to you on that. Let me think about that. Let me chew on that for a second and I'll get back to you. The last tip is like the previous one, but this really comes to if you're in group settings, sometimes issues come up. I want you to intentionally practice not feeling the need to save the room at that specific moment. Say, give me some time and I'll get back to you. You can say, I'll share with you what my thoughts are via email, and you can give me some feedback on that. Practice not feeling the urge and the need to solve it in the moment. Because chances are, if you're solving it in the moment, you don't have all of the tools that you need to solve the thing appropriately or with the most impact. So as we spent our time together today, I want to make note that unlearning urgency is not going to be easy. It's definitely not going to be overnight because we've been utilizing this as North Star, for a better lack of words, for so long. So a lot of our systems and practices, the things that we reward and the things that we recognize in our organizations is based on how much you can produce and how fast versus the quality. And if you are focusing on the quality, are you providing adequate time for that quality to actually come about? As we leave out today, I want to leave you with a quote. Urgency demands your energy, but only intentionality deserves it. I want you to chew on that. I so appreciate you joining me in the Leadership Lounge today. If this podcast resonated with you, like it, share it. Please subscribe to the channel. Also leave a comment, leave a question. I love to be able to engage with you because this is real work and real work that deserves to be done because we have so much writing on it. And you are put in this moment at this specific time for a reason. You're capable. You're able. Let's continue to unpack these things and discover these things that get in the way of our impactful leadership together. I know that some of the things that we're talking about are hard truths, and it may feel like tension against everything that you know and what you value. Don't keep it to yourself. Leave it in the comments. Let us talk about it. Other people can learn from that. Until next time, until we're back in this Leadership Lounge, I want you to remember that this is a journey. There's no arrival. It's only alignment.
Yeah.